Okay, so we've done the automatic stitching with the carbon garment processor, and now we just need to check where we need to do any manual stitching. So here on the zipper is one area, and also the edge of some of the belt straps needs stitching. So stitching these is really easy. We just select the back mesh, hold shift, and then select the front one, and then click on the carbon stitching icon on the carbon shelf. In the outliner it shows up red because we have no stitch point selected. Because these panels are completely overlapping, I am fine with selecting all points to be stitched by putting star into each point group. The stitch node has two modes of operation, ordered points and procedural. You can double click on the stitch icon on the carbon shelf to pull up the relevant documentation. When the count is 0, it is using ordered points. We want the procedural mode, so we set the count to 1, so that each stitch point of the second cloth we selected only makes one stitch with the closest vertex of the first cloth. The radius controls where stitches are created, in this case where the distance between the two cloths is 0.1 scene units or less. So let's try that default, and if it doesn't work we'll increase the radius until at least it stitches the edge. Okay, so that worked. Now moving on to the belt straps. We simply do the same thing again. Select the back, hold shift, select the front, and click once on the carbon stitching icon. This time I only want to stitch the belt strap edge. So we put a star in the larger panel to select all the points, and just select the vertices along the strap edge. Hold Control and add them to the belt strap cloth point group. Let's set the count to 1 and see if they stitch. Yep, good. Now let's look at a stitch that needs a larger radius than the default. Let's stitch this strap here. Same procedure as before. Select the back cloth, then the strap, and create a carbon stitch node. Put a star in the point group of the first cloth and select the edge of the strap, and all done. Oh, I forgot to set the count, and so it's used an ordered stitch. Let's set the count to 1 and reset. No stitch is created, so 0.1 is not a large enough search radius. Now in fact, because it procedurally stitches the closest point between the second and the first cloth, we can just enter a large radius and the rest is automatic. So let's just go with 1. Reset, there, all done. Right, that's all the stitching done for now. Next we need to bind the belt area of the jeans to the avatar body, or the jeans are going to fall down. First we need to turn the avatar body into a carbon collider. Select the body and click on the carbon collider button on the shelf. Now we need to give the carbon collider an appropriate thickness, or as we call it in carbon, fatness. Our default scene scale here is in centimeters, so we have an inner fatness that will be used for collision, and let's set that to 0.5 centimeters. And on the outside we can tweak the fatness to get the best setting. Here we are looking at the carbon physics drawer of the avatar that includes collision. If we go with 0.2 for the outer fatness, i.e. 2 millimeters, you can see the body poking through the sim meshes. If we go with 1.5, you can just see the body. Carbon would probably handle this okay and push the cloth away from the legs, and you might want to use this setting for a muscle bound look, but the correct setting for this is the 1mm collision offset we saw in Marvelous. Okay, now to create the belt binding we need to select the simulation mesh for the avatar, and then hold shift and select the belt cloth and click on the carbon binding icon. We're happy to have a binding here of all the points, so let's just put star for the face and point groups. There we go. Later on, if we want, we can tighten up the binding distance using the surface offset and give the belt area a bit of movement with the radius, and control that with the stiffness. Check out the docs for more info. Now as a final step, we just need to weld the button in place. We lost our button along the way, so here it is again. We have a carbon macro to help weld the button. First let's get it in position. Let's display the render mesh to double check we've got a good position. Okay, a little further tweak. Okay, so now we select the cloth first, and then holding shift, the button, and then we run the button macro. This can handle 1 button or 100 buttons, but only for one panel. Now I want 8 welds rather than 4. Let's talk about the button in a little bit more detail. Here are the welding controls. You can find more about these by double clicking on the welding icon on the shelf. The button is a rigid body, so it also has a mass. And you can set the mass here in the rigid. It defaults to 0.001 kilograms, i.e. 1 gram. Again, to find more about the rigid, you know what to do. You can also check out the separate video on the button welding macro. Now finally, we need to create an output mesh for this button, because this was not done automatically in this version 2.14.2, but it may be in future versions. So we select the button shaped body and right click on the carbon macros and select create body output mesh copies. Now that we've got an output mesh, we can give it a material. There are just a couple of final things to do. We need to set up our cloth material properties, and I have a jeans material I can load. So you can see here that we have a thickness of 1mm, a weight of 0.25 kilograms, i.e. 250 grams per meter squared. And we have material properties set to match the behavior of denim, i.e. it stretches very little but bends easily. These material settings are designed to go with a simulation setting of 10 iterations and 100 subdivisions. This number of subdivisions and iterations is needed because the jean leg panels have 10,000 triangles, and that means a network of several hundred from the top to the bottom of the panel. Okay, let's sim a few frames. It's not going to be super quick because we've got 60k triangles and 1,000 iterations total per frame. That looks good. And you'll remember that we use the draped cloth panels as a reference for the simulation. That's one option. Another option is to use the flat panels, just as Marvelous did. And in the next video, we'll show you the outcome of using those different approaches. Thank you for watching.